My name is Madison Ray. I'm 32, a federal district judge based in Chicago. But if you had walked into my sister's engagement party last Friday, you'd think I was the caterer's assistant, or worse, someone who just wandered in off the street. To my family, I've always been Maddie, the quiet one, the background character in Vanessa's dazzling spotlight. And that night was supposed to be all about her, until it wasn't. Until one sentence from me, 5 words spoken with measured calm, shattered the illusion she'd built for over a decade. "You argued in my courtroom." Silence. Jack, her fiancé, froze. The smile that had comfortably hung on his face all evening vanished. And suddenly everyone at the perfectly decorated garden dinner stopped chewing, stopped drinking, stopped pretending. Time stood still, and for once in my life, everyone was looking at me. But before we get to that moment, let me tell you how we got there. Growing up in the Ray household was a bit like starring in a 2-woman play, where only one actress ever got lines. Vanessa, my older sister by 4 years, was a force. She was loud, confident, charming, and our parents adored her for it. School plays, lead roles, cheer captain, obviously. Family vacation center of every photo. Me. I got straight A's, quietly excelled in debate, volunteered at the library, and was labeled easy. My mom would beam Maddie's so independent. Vanessa just needs more attention. And that was the rhythm of our family. The squeaky wheel got the spotlight. I remember in 8th grade bringing home my report card, all A's, including honors math. I placed it carefully on the kitchen table, hoping someone would notice. That same day, Vanessa had been selected to model in a local department store fashion show. Guess which one made the dinner conversation? It wasn't malicious, I think. My parents, Mark and Angela Ray, are decent people. Suburban Chicago, middle-class, supportive in their own way. But they just didn't know how to celebrate 2 daughters who were different in every way. And over time, I learned not to expect the applause. Instead, I learned to clap for myself. By the time I was in high school, I knew I wanted to pursue law. The structure, the clarity, the logic. It gave me a sense of identity I never got at home. I didn't shout about it. I didn't need to. I joined the mock trial team, devoured books about landmark cases, and built my own world, one where effort equaled recognition, not just volume. When I got into Northwestern's law school, my dad's response was, "That's going to be a lot of student loans." Maddie. Meanwhile, when Vanessa got a marketing internship at a downtown agency, they threw her a little party with balloons. It became a pattern. Vanessa, loud, golden, glossy. Me, capable, silent, underestimated. And you know what? For years, I let it be that way. I told myself it didn't matter what they thought. I believed that success was quiet, that dignity didn't demand applause. But that belief was about to be tested. I hadn't planned to go to the engagement party. Vanessa had called me the week prior, barely disguising her usual condescension. "It's just going to be a simple affair," she said. "You don't have to dress up. It's not like you'll know anyone in Jack's circle anyway." I went anyway. I wore a navy cocktail dress, pulled my hair into a loose chignon, and reminded myself, you have nothing to prove. But standing there under string lights and white hydrangea centerpieces, sipping champagne that tasted like regret, I realized maybe I had everything to prove. I didn't know that night would unravel a lifetime of silence. That it would rip open every little moment I'd swallowed and buried, every small humiliation I'd endured at family dinners, holiday brunches, and birthday calls that always seemed to celebrate someone else. But it did. Because when you spend enough years being quiet, the day you finally speak, people listen, even if it's just 5 words, even if it ruins a party. Growing up, I learned how to disappear without ever leaving the room. My sister Vanessa had a gravitational pull. She didn't just walk into spaces, she owned them. And she needed to. Whether it was the church bake sale or a high school pep rally, Vanessa could find a spotlight anywhere and bask in it effortlessly. She didn't need to compete with me because I never stood a chance. And I didn't mind. At least that's what I told myself. Our house in Naperville, Illinois, was picture perfect on the outside. My dad was a high school principal. My mom ran a small event planning business from home. From afar, we looked like any other middle-class American family trying to balance work, soccer practice, and the occasional family road trip. But inside, the emotional scales were permanently tipped. When Vanessa brought home a B+ on her chemistry quiz, Mom stayed up until midnight baking cheer-up brownies. When I made the honor roll 4 semesters in a row, I got a nice job, kiddo, and a pat on the back. She needed more attention, they said. I was low maintenance. That was the word they loved, like I was a houseplant. But what they didn't realize was that even houseplants need sunlight sometimes. I never confronted my parents about the imbalance. Honestly, I wasn't even fully aware of it until my 20s. Back then, I just assumed Vanessa was more fun, more extroverted, more lovable, and maybe I was just meant to play support. It wasn't that I lacked ambition, quite the opposite. By the time I graduated from Northwestern, I was one of the top in my class. I interned at the Cook County DA's office, then clerked under Judge Linda Miller, one of the most respected judges in Illinois. Judge Miller became more than a mentor. She saw me, not as Vanessa's quiet little sister, as Madison, sharp, reliable, formidable in court. Still, I didn't broadcast my wins, my promotions, my bar admission. Even when I was offered a seat on the bench, the youngest judge in our district at 30, I didn't call home to celebrate. Why? Because I knew what the response would be. Something like, "Oh wow, that's great. Honey, Vanessa just got a bonus at work too." I was tired of measuring my worth against the yardstick they used for her, so I didn't share. 3 years ago, I attended Thanksgiving at our parents' house. Vanessa was already there, glass of red wine in hand, regaling everyone with tales from her marketing firm, the clients, the campaigns, the so-called branding genius she had just pitched to. I wasn't even seated before my Aunt Marla asked, "So, Maddie, what are you up to these days?" I said, "I'm assisting Judge Miller." Before I could elaborate, Vanessa jumped in. "She means she's doing admin work at the courthouse, probably making sure everyone's coffee is hot and folders are color-coded." She laughed, tossing her hair like it was the most harmless joke in the world. Everyone else chuckled, even Aunt Marla, even Dad. I smiled politely and sipped my cider. I didn't correct her. Why would I? Nobody had ever asked for the real story anyway. That moment, that single misunderstanding became my identity to the entire family. I had just passed the bar. I was already drafting legal opinions and working on major cases. But to them, I was the girl who answered phones and organized pens for someone more important. And I let it stay that way. Was it pride? Was it bitterness? Maybe both. But mostly it was fatigue. It's exhausting to have to fight to be seen. So I stayed invisible. I let Vanessa shine. Let them believe what they wanted to believe. I kept showing up at holidays, playing the part of the agreeable, unremarkable younger sister. And every time someone said, "There's nothing wrong with honest work," I swallowed the urge to scream. They weren't wrong. Honest work is honorable. But I wasn't being honest. I was complicit in my own erasure. And it would have stayed that way until Vanessa's engagement party. That was the night everything changed. Because that was the night I finally remembered who I was and decided the world would remember too. Vanessa's engagement party was everything I expected: extravagant, perfectly staged, and pulsing with her favorite kind of attention. The kind that came with champagne glasses, fairy lights, and applause that lasted just long enough to make sure no one missed it. The venue. Our parents' backyard, but it had been transformed into something that looked like it had been plucked from a bridal magazine. White roses draped over the pergola, soft jazz playing from hidden speakers, and servers in black aprons, walking around with silver trays of shrimp skewers and imported cheese. I arrived early, not because I wanted to, but because Mom had asked for help. I was still the reliable one, the one who showed up when needed, quietly, efficiently, without demanding credit. "Madison, sweetie, could you help set up the drink station?" Mom asked, barely glancing at me while fluffing a centerpiece. "Sure," I replied, already rolling up my sleeves. Dad was out in the yard stringing more lights through the oak trees. Vanessa wants everything to look magical when the sun sets, he explained, standing on a ladder, half-balanced, sweating in his polo shirt. I nodded, arranging the glasses and bottles the way I'd organized courtroom exhibits, precise, symmetrical, neat. Even here where I was supposed to be a guest, I'd been drafted into the background crew. As guests trickled in, I found my safe spot, a corner near the garden where I could observe but remain mostly unseen. It was my comfort zone, invisible but present. Still working at the courthouse? Maddie, Uncle Rick asked, patting my arm like I was a sweet child who just hadn't figured out life yet. Admin assistant, I replied automatically. The words were bitter in my throat but had become second nature. It was easier than explaining the truth. Aunt Colleen gave me a sympathetic squeeze. You'll figure it out. Not everyone's a Vanessa. I smiled as if that didn't hurt. I was 32, a federal judge, and somehow still being pitied like a struggling intern. That's when the black BMW pulled into the driveway. Vanessa stepped out first, looking like she'd just walked off a runway. Diamond earrings, satin dress, hair curled to perfection. She moved like a movie star in a private premiere. Jack stepped out beside her, tall, handsome, and composed. His navy suit tailored his posture perfect. They looked, well, perfect. Mom, Dad, Vanessa squealed, hugging our parents with the kind of flourish that demanded an audience. Everything looks amazing, but those flowers would pop better on the center table. And like always, without questioning her tone or her timing, our parents adjusted everything to her preferences. She turned to the crowd. Everyone. This is Jack Sterling, senior counsel at Grayson and Bell. He's brilliant, charming, and modest, so I'll tell you all how he just won a $5 million settlement against Westbrook Pharmaceuticals. Jack gave a polite smile and a soft wave. It was a team effort. Don't be modest, baby, Vanessa chimed in. He practically ran the courtroom. I sipped my champagne and tried not to roll my eyes. My cousin Heather sidled up next to me. She was one of the few in the family who knew the truth. She'd attended my swearing-in, had even visited my courtroom once on a school field trip with her high school students. Her honor's in the building, she whispered with a smirk. You're really going to let her keep running this narrative? Tonight's her moment, I replied. You said that at Christmas. And at Thanksgiving. I don't need the drama. Heather raised an eyebrow. But what if the drama needs you? Before I could respond, Vanessa spotted us. There you are, she called, dragging Jack over by the hand. Jack, this is my cousin Heather, and of course, my little sister Madison. Jack extended a hand toward me. Nice to meet you. Vanessa talks about you all the time. I shook his hand, and for a flicker of a second, I saw it recognition. A slight narrowing of the eyes. Something in his face shifted, but it passed. Vanessa, oblivious, kept going. Madison works at the county courthouse. Admin stuff. I've told her she should apply for better firms, but she likes it low-key. Jack gave me a measured look. I'm sure Madison knows what's best for her. There was a pause. An awkward, telling silence. Vanessa didn't notice. She was already launching into another story about Jack's courtroom prowess and how impressed her friends were by his suit game. But Jack was watching me. He knew something wasn't adding up. And he wasn't wrong. Dinner was served just as the sky dipped into a soft twilight, the string lights overhead casting a golden glow across the long patio table. The seating arrangement, of course, had Vanessa and Jack at the center of everything, flanked by my parents, her closest friends, and a couple of business associates who looked like they belonged in a magazine spread about Chicago's up-and-coming power couples. I was placed near the end of the table, tucked between our Aunt Deborah and my great-uncle Lou, both of whom spent the better part of the evening trying to remember where they parked and whether quinoa had gluten. It was fine. I preferred distance. From here, I could observe. Watch Vanessa glow in her element, commanding the conversation, orchestrating her image with the precision of a PR firm. She laughed at every toast, tossed her hair just enough times to showcase her engagement ring. And every now and then she shot me a glance across the table, not hostile exactly, but smug. Like she'd won a silent game I never agreed to play. I kept sipping my wine. As dessert plates were cleared, my father rose to offer a toast. He clinked his glass cheeks flushed with wine and pride. To Vanessa and Jack, he began. Vanessa, you've always been our shooting star. And now you've found someone whose light shines just as brightly. I smiled politely even as a small knot twisted in my chest. A few more toasts followed. Jack's parents, a friend from law school. Even Heather gave a quick, cheeky one about true love and decent prenups. Then Vanessa stood up. Nobody ever toasts the person who deserves it most, she announced with that bright sparkle in her eye. Jack has some amazing news to share and he's too humble to say it, so I will. Jack looked uncomfortable. She nudged him gently. Go on. He cleared his throat. It's not a big deal, but yes. I recently won a settlement against Westbrook Pharmaceuticals. It was a huge deal, Vanessa corrected. 7-figure settlement, and Jack was lead counsel. His firm is already talking about moving him to senior partner. Gasps and impressed murmurs filled the air. Even my dad looked visibly impressed. I, on the other hand, blinked in surprise. I knew that case. Not from the news. From my bench. The case had landed in my courtroom after Judge Harmon fell ill unexpectedly. Jack Sterling had argued before me, sharp, well-prepared, aggressive, but respectful. I had ruled in favor of his motion to dismiss one of the claims. He'd won, yes, but it had come through careful negotiation and strong precedent. It was surreal hearing about it now, like watching someone describe your own dream back to you. Only they didn't know you were there when it happened. Vanessa, clearly high on attention and 2 glasses of white wine, continued. Jack works with real judges, big clients, high-pressure cases. Not everyone's cut out for that kind of stress. And then it happened. She looked at me, locked eyes, smirked. Some people are just better suited for support roles. Right, Maddie. A few people chuckled awkwardly. My mother looked down. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Jack glanced at me confused, and if I read it right, almost concerned. Vanessa turned to him with that falsely sweet tone she'd perfected over the years. How long has my little sister been working admin at the courthouse now? 3 years. You should give her some tips on climbing the ladder. I could feel every muscle in my jaw tightening. Someone passed the dessert tray. No one touched it. Abby's at the county courthouse, she added, waving a hand. Not a firm. She mostly answers phones and organizes files. Don't you, Maddie? All eyes were on me. I should have let it go. I had for years. I had smiled through the comments, laughed off the jabs, swallowed my pride, and washed it down with Chardonnay. But not tonight. Not after hearing about my own courtroom like I was a bystander. Not after watching her bask in a glory built partially, if indirectly, by me. I met Jack's eyes across the table. And I said calmly, clearly, You argued in my courtroom. The silence was instant and absolute. Vanessa's smile froze. Jack stared at me. What? He asked slowly. I tilted my head. The Westbrook case. The one with the pharmaceutical payout. It was my courtroom. I presided. He blinked visibly, working through the mental math. You're Judge Ray? My voice was steady. Yes. Vanessa laughed a high, nervous sound. Don't be ridiculous. Jack didn't laugh. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Jack was staring at me like someone had just yanked the floor out from under him. Judge Madison Ray? He said again, barely above a whisper. You're... That Judge Ray, Northern District Court. My grandmother, seated beside me, reached for my hand under the table. Her grip was small, but firm. I always knew you were destined for something bigger, dear, she whispered. Around us, chairs creaked. Wine glasses were set down mid-sip. Conversations that had buzzed a minute ago were now stone dead. All that remained was a thick, pulsing silence, and Vanessa's confusion turning rapidly into disbelief. That's impossible, she said. You've told us for years that you were just administrative support. I never said that, I replied quietly. But you let us believe. I told everyone I was assisting Judge Miller. That's true. I was her law clerk. Then I joined the DA's office. Then I was appointed. Vanessa's laugh this time was sharp. That's absurd. You're not a judge. You can't be. You would have told us. I turned to my father. Would it have mattered if I did? His mouth opened, then closed. He didn't answer. Jack was still processing. I've been in your courtroom, he said more to himself than anyone else. You issued the ruling on that contract motion. You questioned my citations. You told me my cross-examination was getting personal. Yes, I said, my voice low but unwavering. Vanessa's expression cracked like a dropped plate. This is my engagement party, she snapped. And you waited until now. You kept this secret just to ruin it for me. I didn't come here to ruin anything I said. I didn't plan to say a word. But you've spent the entire evening parading Jack around and mocking me again. I wasn't going to sit here and let you rewrite my story one more time. My mother was crying quietly. My father's face was pale and his wine glass was still clutched midair. Uncle Lou muttered, "She's really a judge to no one in particular." Aunt Colleen dropped her fork. It would have been comical if it didn't hurt so much. All those years of working late into the night. All the hearings, the trials, the responsibility of weighing people's futures. All the moments of self-doubt I pushed through the wins I never celebrated because no one seemed to care. And now here I was, finally seen only because my sister had poked too hard and too long. Vanessa stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the flagstone patio. "You always do this," she hissed. "You pretend to be small and then bam, you make everything about you." I stared at her stunned. "Are you serious? This is my night. And you hijacked it with your dramatic reveal like some courtroom soap opera." Vanessa, Jack said quietly, standing beside her. She turned to him. "Don't defend her. Tell them she's lying." Jack didn't move. "She's not lying." Vanessa blinked. "What?" Jack took a breath slowly. "She's not lying. I've argued in her courtroom. Judge Ray is respected. Fair. Honestly, I wish I had realized it sooner. She's been pretending," Vanessa insisted, her voice rising. "No," I said, standing now too. "I just stopped trying to explain myself to people who never really listened." My father finally spoke. "You're really a judge." I nodded. My mother dabbed her eyes with a napkin. "But why didn't you tell us?" I looked at them, the parents who always meant well, but never quite looked past Vanessa's shadow. "Because it never felt like you wanted to know." A hush fell again. Uncle Rick cleared his throat awkwardly. "I told the actual judge of the Northern District Court that she should apply to paralegal school," he muttered. "Well, I'll be damned." Vanessa looked around, realized she'd lost the room, and not just figuratively. Her face, once flushed with power, was now pale with fury. "I can't believe this," she said. "I can't believe you'd do this to me." Jack reached for her arm. "Vanessa," she yanked away. "Don't touch me. You knew. You knew and didn't tell me." "I didn't know until tonight," he said. On the bench she looks different. Black robe. Hair pulled back. "But now it makes sense. Your sister isn't who you said she was." "I didn't say anything wrong," she snapped. "You said she answered phones." Vanessa's lips parted. But there was no defense left. Just silence. Just consequences. After Vanessa stormed off into the house, napkin tossed dramatically onto the table, a heavy, awkward silence settled over the patio. The kind of silence that makes you hyper-aware of your own breathing. A few guests murmured polite excuses and began to shuffle away, some with visible embarrassment, others just desperate to escape the emotional fallout. My Aunt Colleen gave me a strained smile and mouthed, "Good for you," before retreating toward the driveway with her husband. Jack stood for a moment, torn between staying with the crowd or following his fiancé. Finally, with a quiet, "Excuse me," he disappeared into the house after her. I remained seated, still staring at my untouched slice of cake. My mother's mascara had begun to run her eyes glossy. My father stared ahead like he'd just been hit by a slow-moving truck. Neither of them said anything. It was my grandmother who spoke first. "I always knew there was more to you," she said softly. "But I never imagined this." I smiled at her faintly. "I didn't want to make a big deal out of it." "Maybe you should have," she replied, squeezing my hand. Across the table, Uncle Rick exhaled and reached for his wine glass. "Well, I feel like a total jackass." "You're not alone." Aunt Colleen muttered from behind him as she doubled back for her forgotten purse. When Jack returned alone a few minutes later, the tension was still thick. "She needs some space," he said quietly, avoiding everyone's eyes. "I'm going to take her home." I nodded, not knowing what to say. I didn't want to apologize. Not for telling the truth. He hesitated. "For what it's worth? You're an excellent judge. That ruling on the Westbrook case. It was sharp. You were tough, but fair." "Thank you," I said, my voice smaller than I expected. He lingered for a moment longer. "I'll talk to her when she's calm." And then he was gone. That left me alone with my parents. For the first time in years, just the three of us. The catering staff moved quietly around us, cleaning plates and refilling water glasses like they weren't witnessing the unraveling of an entire family dynamic. My mother finally broke the silence. "We've always been proud of you, Madison." I turned to her slowly. "Have you?" My father rubbed a hand over his face, weary. "It's not that we weren't proud. It's just Vanessa she needed more attention." I finished, my voice neutral. "I've heard that before." "We didn't mean to overlook you," my mother whispered. "We thought you didn't need it." "And so I stopped wanting it," I replied. I stood brushing off the back of my dress and grabbing my jacket from the chair. "I think I should go." Neither of them protested. My father just nodded slowly. "You deserve better than how we treated you tonight," he said. "And maybe how we've treated you for a long time." I drove home in silence, the city lights flickering past the windshield like fading applause. My phone buzzed repeatedly with missed calls and texts. Some from extended family, a few from coworkers who'd probably already heard the gossip. But none from Vanessa. I wasn't surprised. What did surprise me was how light I felt. Like something I'd carried for years had finally slid off my shoulders. Still, there was grief too. Because while telling the truth felt right, it didn't mean it didn't hurt. I hadn't just exposed Vanessa's behavior, I'd exposed the cracks in our family's foundation. I'd forced a confrontation none of us had been ready for. And now, no one could pretend anymore. Not them. Not me. The next morning, I woke to 17 missed calls and 32 text messages. My voicemail was full. Most were from relatives ranging from shocked to apologetic to vaguely panicked. 3 were from my parents. None were from Vanessa. I sat with my coffee in the quiet morning light, reading message after message filled with half apologies and half confessions. "I didn't realize how impressive your job was. I'm sorry I ever thought you were just answering phones. Proud of you, Maddie. Really. It was strange to be seen after so long in the shadows." Part of me wanted to call Vanessa, to ask how she was to extend a hand. But the other part, the part that had swallowed years of passive jabs and forced smiles, that part needed her to come to me first. It was just after noon when my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment I debated whether to answer it at all. I hadn't even changed out of the oversized hoodie I'd been wearing since the night before, but curiosity eventually won out. I opened the door and found Jack standing there holding a cup holder with 2 coffees and looking awkward. "Nathan," I said, surprised. "Is she with you?" "No," he replied, glancing down at the cups in his hand. "She doesn't know I'm here." I stepped aside to let him in. "You're braver than you look." He gave a small smile. "I figured you might need caffeine if I was about to stick my nose where it doesn't belong." I took the coffee and gestured toward the small dining area. My apartment was clean but modest, a few paintings, rows of law books lining the shelves, no fancy decor, no dramatic chandeliers like Vanessa had at her place. Just mine, quiet and grounded. Jack looked around, his eyes landing on my law degree hanging neatly framed above my bookshelf. "Columbia," he said, impressed. "Did Vanessa know?" "She knows now," I said dryly, then immediately regretted the edge in my tone. He sat, both hands around his coffee. "About last night." "You don't have to apologize," I cut in. "You didn't do anything wrong." "I feel like I did," he said quietly. "I should have recognized you. I've seen you in action, but I never put it together." "You're not the first," I said with a shrug. Black robe, hair pulled back, whole different vibe. It wasn't just that he replied, setting the coffee down. Vanessa always described you differently, said you were kind of lost, quiet, smart but unsure of yourself, like you hadn't figured it out yet. I tilted my head. And now, he met my gaze. Now I realized she was describing the version of you she needed to believe existed. That hit harder than I expected. He leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. She didn't sleep last night. She was crying, yelling. Said you humiliated her. I didn't mean to, I said quietly. I know, he nodded. But it hit something deep. Something she wasn't ready to face. I stayed quiet, letting the silence fill the space between us. After a moment, he said, "There's something else I should tell you." I raised an eyebrow. She hasn't been honest about her job, he admitted. She told everyone she was a marketing director, big campaigns, leadership role. But she's not. She's a mid-level account manager. She hasn't been promoted in 2 years. The project she bragged about at Christmas, it never existed. I blinked. She lied to you? She embellished? He corrected gently. Because she felt like she had to. Because she didn't want to feel ordinary. I looked down at my coffee. Vanessa ordinary. That's hard to picture. She told me once that being exceptional was the only way she ever felt loved. That stunned me. All these years I had resented her for hogging the spotlight. But maybe she wasn't basking in it. Maybe she was drowning in it, trying to stay above water. Did she say that? I asked softly. He nodded. Said your parents expected her to always shine, that they never praised effort, only results. And she thought if she ever slipped, they'd see her the way they saw you. I didn't flinch at that. Instead, I felt something unfamiliar. Pity. Maybe even compassion. Jack leaned forward. I care about her, Madison. But last night, it opened my eyes. To some things I've ignored. The way she treated you, I'd never seen that side of her. She was embarrassed, I offered. She was cruel, he corrected. And I don't know if I can build a future with someone who needs to diminish others to feel good about herself. I looked at him carefully. Are you thinking about ending it? He didn't answer right away. I'm thinking about whether the woman I love is ready to be honest with me, with herself, with you. Because if she's not, I don't think I can move forward. There was a pause. I never meant to come between you two, I said. You didn't, he replied. The truth did. He stood, finished his coffee, and walked to the door. Before stepping out, he turned to me. For what it's worth, Judge Ray, he said with a faint smile, I think the courtroom's the second most powerful place you've ever stood. And then he left, leaving behind only the scent of coffee and a lingering truth neither of us could unsee. The second time my doorbell rang that weekend, I knew it wasn't Jack. This time I opened the door to find Vanessa standing there. No dramatic outfit, no designer handbag, no perfect makeup or flawless waves in her hair. Just jeans, a wrinkled sweatshirt, and her bare-faced, tired eyes red-rimmed from crying. She looked younger, smaller, almost like the sister I remembered from childhood before we became strangers who shared holiday meals and polite jabs. Can I come in? She asked, her voice hoarse. I stepped aside without a word. She entered slowly, her eyes scanning the apartment like she was walking through a museum exhibit of a life she'd never bothered to ask about. Her gaze landed on my Columbia diploma. She didn't say anything, just stared at it for a long, silent second. Then she sat on the edge of my couch. I heard Jack came by, she said. He did. She nodded like she expected that. He told me. He thinks we should postpone the wedding. I sat in the chair across from her. I'm sorry. Are you? She asked, but there was no bite in her tone. No sarcasm. Just genuine curiosity. Yes, I said simply, I didn't want to hurt you. She looked out the window, eyes distant. Then why didn't you tell us all these years that you were a judge? It was a question I'd been asked 6 times since the party, but coming from her, it landed differently. More raw, more personal. Because I didn't think it mattered, I said. Because every time I achieved something, it felt like I was still invisible. So I stopped offering updates. Stopped trying to compete. Vanessa didn't look at me, but I saw her shoulders rise with a deep inhale. I didn't see it that way, she whispered. I always thought you were Hiding. Like you didn't care enough to share. Maybe I was hiding, I admitted. But it wasn't because I didn't care. It was because I got tired of watching you soak up all the praise while I sat in the corner pretending not to need any. She turned to me slowly. Her eyes were glassy now. I didn't mean to make you feel small. I nodded, believing her, and not all at once. You didn't have to mean it, I said gently. You just had to keep doing it. We sat in silence for a moment, the kind that only siblings can share, where entire conversations live inside quiet. Then she spoke again. I've spent most of my life trying to be exceptional, she confessed. Not for fun, not for pride, but because I thought if I stopped being impressive, I'd stop mattering. I looked at her, really looked, and for the first time in years, I saw not the polished image she projected to the world, but the fear behind it. The desperation. The fragile girl who had been told her worth was in her charisma, her achievements, her ability to shine brighter than anyone else in the room, even if it meant burning herself out. So you lied, I said softly, about your job. She winced. Jack told you. I nodded. He said you're not a marketing director, that you haven't been promoted. She exhaled sharply. I was going to tell everyone, eventually. But every time I tried, I heard Mom's voice saying, "You're the one we never have to worry about." And I didn't want to disappoint them. I reached for the mug on the coffee table, still full from Jack's visit earlier, and held it between my palms. They didn't put that pressure on us, Vanessa. Not directly. Didn't they? She asked. Maybe not with words. But the way Dad talked about your grades like facts and mine like trophies. The way Mom posted my marketing internship all over Facebook but barely mentioned your law school acceptance. I didn't argue, because she wasn't wrong. She leaned back on the couch, folding her arms around her stomach like she was trying to hold herself together. I've been terrified of being ordinary, she said, because I thought that made me forgettable. I looked at her, and I thought if I stayed silent, I'd be safe. She blinked. So we both lived small lives, just in opposite ways. I nodded. Looks like it. The moment lingered. I don't know how to fix this, she said. With you. With Jack. With myself. Start with honesty, I offered. It's what I finally did. She looked at me for a long time. Then, to my surprise, she smiled. It wasn't smug. It wasn't showy. It was small, real. I am proud of you, she said. That's part of the problem. Her voice cracked on the last word, but she didn't look away. And just like that, some part of me, some part I didn't realize had been clenched for years, started to loosen. I'm proud of you too, I said. Even when you're not trying to be perfect. The days following Vanessa's visit were strangely quiet, not the strained kind of quiet we'd grown used to, but a new kind. Tentative. Neutral. Like the emotional dust was still settling. We didn't talk every day. We didn't hug it out like some feel-good movie where a sibling rivalry dissolves overnight. But something had shifted. The air between us no longer buzzed with competition. There was space now, awkward, yes, but breathable. Our parents started calling more often too. Each conversation a bit clumsy, filled with both overcompensation and regret. We're so proud of you, sweetheart, Mom said on one call, the phrase stiff on her tongue like it had been stuck in storage for years. Dad on another call asked for a link to a local news article about one of my rulings. He sounded sheepish, almost like he didn't think he had the right to be proud. I sent it anyway, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to diminish myself in the process. 10 days after the engagement party, my mom called with a request I had been quietly dreading. Can you come to Sunday dinner? She asked, her tone a strange blend of hope and anxiety. Everyone will be there. Vanessa, Jack, your father and I. We just think it's time. Time for what I wasn't sure. Reconciliation. A family-wide reckoning. Or just another night of pot roast and emotional landmines. Still, I said yes. Because after everything that had happened, not showing up felt like another kind of silence I was tired of living in. I arrived early as usual. Old habits die hard. The house smelled like roast and rosemary, like childhood, like memories I wasn't sure how to feel about anymore. Vanessa was already there, sitting stiffly on the couch in jeans and a cardigan, no makeup, her hair in a simple ponytail. Jack sat beside her, one hand resting gently on her knee, not possessive, just present. My mother greeted me with a hug that lingered a second too long, as if she was afraid I might vanish. My dad gave me an awkward shoulder pat and a gravelly, "Good to see you, kid." It wasn't much, but it was something. Dinner was tense at first. Small talk about the weather, neighborhood gossip, the recent road construction downtown. No one mentioned the engagement party. Not until dessert. As my mom served her usual apple pie, my dad cleared his throat like he was preparing to give a speech. "I think it's time we clear the air," he said, his voice firmer than I'd expected. "We've all had time to process what happened, and I think we need to talk. Honestly, as a family." Vanessa's fork clinked loudly against her plate. "Fine," she said. "Let's talk about how my sister decided to drop a bombshell at my engagement party just to steal attention." Vanessa, Jack warned gently, but she kept going. "She let everyone think she was some struggling admin for years, and then she suddenly reveals she's a judge. It felt planned." I set down my fork. "I didn't plan anything," I said evenly. "I've let people believe whatever they wanted because I was tired of defending myself. You just pushed too hard." My mom tried to interject. "Girls." "No," my dad said, surprising everyone by interrupting her. "Let them talk. We all need to hear this." Vanessa looked at me, eyes sharp. "You've always been jealous of me." I laughed, not unkindly, just disbelieving. "Are you serious? You were the smart one, the perfect one. Why can't you be more like Madison?" That's all I ever heard. My jaw slackened. "Are you actually saying you felt like you were in my shadow?" She stared at me. "Yes, constantly. You were the star," I said. "You were the one who got the praise, the attention. I worked twice as hard just to be noticed. Half the time, I stopped trying." My parents were speechless, heads turning between us like they were watching a tennis match of revelations. "They threw a party when you got into Northwestern," Vanessa snapped. "I got a 'that's nice' when I got into DePaul." "They threw a dinner," I corrected, "and only because Aunt June suggested it. When you got your marketing internship, Dad emailed everyone." "We thought we were being fair," Mom whispered, guilt flickering behind her eyes. "Well," Vanessa and I said in unison, "you weren't." And just like that, we both stopped, shocked by the chorus of our pain. Jack finally spoke. "I think," he said carefully, "that both of you felt unseen, just in different ways." The table fell quiet. "Is that possible?" Dad asked, genuinely bewildered. "That we somehow made both of you feel like the least loved?" Vanessa and I looked at each other. For the first time, not with judgment, but recognition. Maybe we hadn't been rivals in the way we thought. Maybe we'd just been mirrors reflecting each other's fears. It was a terrifying thought, but also freeing. The rest of that evening unfolded like peeling wallpaper, layers of emotion, history, and misunderstanding slowly coming off in strips. Some parts tore clean. Others clung stubbornly, needing to be tugged at gently. "I didn't mean to make you feel less," Mom said at one point, her voice shaky. "But I can see now how it happened. How both of you ended up thinking we weren't proud." Vanessa wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. "I wanted to be someone you bragged about. Not just for me, but because I thought that's how I stayed important." "I never needed to be bragged about," I said. "I just wanted to be seen." Dad looked down into his coffee mug. "We really screwed this up, didn't we?" "No one gave us a parenting manual," Mom added, trying to laugh but not quite making it. Jack looked between all of us, then turned to Vanessa. "Why didn't you just tell me?" he asked softly. Vanessa's eyes dropped. "Because I was scared you'd love me less if I was ordinary." Jack reached across the table, his fingers wrapping around hers. "I didn't fall in love with your job title." There was silence. A different kind this time. Healing, maybe, or at least hopeful. After dinner, as we migrated toward the living room, the energy shifted. Still cautious, but lighter. Vanessa and I sat on opposite sides of the couch. Not too close, but not cold. Mom brought out an old photo album, something we hadn't looked at together in years. And as the pages turned, so did something else inside us. Memories reemerged. Not just the painful ones, but the silly, sweet ones, too. A photo of me in a Halloween judge's robe at 8 years old. One of Vanessa holding up a handmade science fair trophy like it was Olympic gold. We laughed a little louder, a little longer than we had in a long time. At one point, Vanessa looked at me and said, "I'm sorry. For a lot of things." I nodded. "Me too." She hesitated. "I don't know how to be your sister without competing with you." "Maybe we don't have to figure it out all at once," I replied. "Maybe we just start over. Small." Her eyes softened. "I'd like that." Over the next few weeks, we stuck to small. Text messages, memes, occasional check-ins that didn't start with passive-aggressive jabs or loaded questions. She even invited me out for coffee one Sunday, just the two of us. It was a little awkward, a little stiff, but we stayed the whole hour. No tears, no sarcasm, just conversation. She told me she'd started therapy. I told her I'd started mentoring a group of young women in law school who reminded me of us, smart, eager, a little bruised by expectations. One Sunday she came over to my place and saw my robe hanging on the coat rack. She touched it gently. "I still can't believe you wear this," she whispered. I smiled. "Some days I can't either." Then she said something I hadn't expected. "You make me want to be better. Not out of competition. Just because I see now what strong looks like." That stayed with me. By the time our parents' anniversary rolled around, the first major family gathering since the infamous engagement party, the air had changed. People approached me differently, some cautiously, others with nervous respect. But no one called me an admin again. That night, as I was sipping wine by the patio, Vanessa walked over and handed me a glass of my favorite Cabernet. "I saw your name in the Bar Association Journal," she said. "The article about the Kingston ruling. They called you one of the most promising judicial minds of your generation." I blinked. "You read it?" "I didn't even have to force myself." She grinned. "It was actually interesting." I laughed. She clinked her glass against mine. "I wasn't surprised," she added, more serious now. "Even when we were kids, you always saw things clearer than everyone else, including me." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Thank you." "I'm proud of you," she said. And this time it didn't sound like it hurt her to say it. It sounded like truth. It sounded like freedom. That fall I started something new. It began with a conversation I had after a courthouse hearing when a second-year associate, a soft-spoken woman named Zoe, nervously approached me outside the elevator. "Judge Ray?" she asked. "Yes." She hesitated, clutching her notebook. I just wanted to say your courtroom feels different. Like I can breathe in there. Not all judges make it feel like that." I smiled. "Thank you. That means a lot." Then she looked at me with wide, honest eyes and asked, "How did you get this confident?" It caught me off guard. I'd spent most of my life swallowing my pride, hiding my wins, waiting for someone else to give me permission to take up space. And now someone was asking me how I became confident. So I started to tell her the truth. That I wasn't always confident. That it took years of letting people underestimate me before I realized I was doing it too to myself. That I had been playing small to make other people comfortable, not because I wasn't capable of more. Zoe nodded, slowly, listening like it was the first time someone had admitted that success wasn't all clarity and control, that even judges get lost in their own reflection sometimes. That night, I thought about how many other women in law and life were probably still dimming themselves out of fear. So I organized a dinner. Just 6 of us at first, then 12, then more. Once a month, I invited women in law, students, clerks, new attorneys to my apartment or a rented space downtown for wine and connection and brutally honest stories. We called it the bench between us. There were no titles, no hierarchy, no bragging. Just stories about insecurity, about power, about how we carry both at once. One night, Vanessa came to help me set up. We laid out place cards, uncorked wine, adjusted lighting. It was simple, cozy, warm. "You really built this?" she asked, glancing around at the small circle of women arriving one by one. "I guess I did." She nodded. "I always thought being powerful meant commanding attention, but this is different. This is quiet power, I didn't say anything, just handed her a stack of name tags. She stayed the whole evening quietly observing, sometimes chiming in. At the end, as we stacked chairs, she said, "I wish I had something like this in marketing. Somewhere we can admit we're scared sometimes." "You could build it," I said. She raised an eyebrow. "You think anyone would come? I think they already need it." She looked thoughtful. And for once, I saw ambition in her that wasn't tied to proving anything, just building something that mattered. That winter, we continued our Sunday coffee tradition. Some days we laughed. Some days we tiptoed around old hurts. But we kept showing up, which is more than we'd done in years. One Sunday, she handed me a postcard from a leadership workshop she was attending. On the back, she had scribbled, "Being ordinary never looked so strong. Thanks for showing me how." I tucked it into my wallet and didn't say a word. But I didn't need to, because I knew she meant it. And she knew I believed her. For the first time in our adult lives, we were building something from scratch, a relationship not based on roles or rivalry, but on reality. It wasn't perfect. Some days we regressed. Some weeks passed in silence. But each time we came back, we were a little softer, a little more honest, a little more ourselves. It was sometime in late March when the phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Judge Ray, the voice on the other end, asked. "Yes, this is Alice Hamilton, editor at the Bar Association Journal. We're running a feature on influential judicial decisions of the year, and your ruling in the Kingston fraud case caught our attention." I paused, blinking at the sunlight slanting across my desk. "Oh, I thank you." She laughed lightly. "It's not a thank you call. It's a congratulations call. You're being profiled in our spring issue." I must have said something appropriate, something gracious, but the rest of the call passed in a blur. Not because I wasn't proud, but because for the first time in a long time, it wasn't the recognition that felt most important. It was who I wanted to share it with. And I knew exactly who that was. The following Sunday, I met Vanessa at our usual cafe. She was already seated when I arrived, waving me over with 2 steaming mugs waiting. "Court roast for the court lady," she teased, sliding my cup toward me with a grin. "Thanks," I replied, sitting down, smiling back. We chatted about work. She mentioned a new project she'd taken on, one she was actually qualified for this time. There was a calm in her, now a quiet confidence that didn't feel performative anymore. Just real. She asked about my latest cases, and I hesitated, not out of habit but consideration. Old instincts still crept in, sometimes whispering, "Don't make her feel small." But Vanessa caught the pause. "You can tell me," she said. "I'm fine, really." So I did. I told her about the Kingston case, the profile in the journal. Her eyes lit up, not with envy but pride. "That's huge," she said, shaking her head in wonder. "Seriously, Mads, that's badass." I laughed. That's one way to put it. "I saw the article already," she added, sipping her coffee. "They called you one of the most promising judicial minds of your generation." I raised an eyebrow. "You read it?" "I read it twice," she said. And I wasn't surprised by a single word. For a moment, I just stared at her. This woman who had once made my skin crawl at family dinners, who had once reduced my life's work to a punchline at a party. Now here she was, proud of me, and not afraid to show it. "You've changed," I said gently. She smiled. "So have you." "I mean it," I continued. "You seem lighter." Vanessa nodded. "Therapy helps. So does not lying to yourself or to everyone else." I smiled into my cup. It's funny. All that time I spent hiding my title, my job, my success. I thought I was doing it to protect the people around me, but really, I was just feeding the same cycle. "Same," she said. "I kept talking about campaigns. I didn't lead promotions. I didn't earn, not to impress people, but to avoid disappointing them." We sat in silence, the kind that didn't demand words. That allowed for the complexity of everything we'd been and everything we were trying to become. She looked at me and said something simple. "I'm really proud of you." And for the first time in our lives, the words didn't feel heavy. They didn't feel overdue. They just felt right. Later that week, I received a package in the mail. Inside was a leather-bound planner embossed with my initials, classic, elegant, quietly luxurious. Tucked inside the front cover was a note scribbled in Vanessa's messy, looping handwriting. For all the decisions still ahead, I hope you never dim your light again. V. I stared at it for a long moment, then tucked it into the inside pocket where I knew I'd find it again when I needed it most. Spring gave way to summer, and with it came more change, the kind that doesn't announce itself with fireworks or grand declarations, but seeps quietly into the rhythms of life. Vanessa and I kept meeting for coffee. Sometimes every Sunday, sometimes not for 2 weeks. The frequency wasn't what mattered. It was the fact that for the first time in our adult lives, we were showing up willingly, without obligation, without scripts. One Sunday she arrived with a sketchbook tucked under her arm. "What's that?" I asked. She looked sheepish. "I've been drawing." I blinked. "You drawing?" "Yeah," she laughed. "Turns out when I'm not trying to outperform the entire city of Chicago, I like making things. I took an online course." She opened the book and flipped to a page that stunned me. It was a simple charcoal rendering of our parents' backyard, the exact spot where the engagement party had unraveled. But this time the lights were soft and the figures small, peaceful. "Wow," I said, genuinely moved. "This is beautiful." Vanessa looked proud, not in the exaggerated look-at-me way she used to, but in a quiet, private way that made me ache for all the years she hadn't allowed herself this kind of softness. "It's weird," she said. "I think I spent so long pretending to be someone impressive that I forgot what it felt like to actually create something. Not to impress, just to express." I understood that better than I wanted to admit. We sat there, sketchbook between us, and for a long time neither of us needed to say anything. Meanwhile, I found myself loosening up in other ways too. I started saying yes to more things, speaking panels, guest lectures, even a podcast interview where I talked openly about being underestimated. "That must have been terrifying," the host said, when I described letting my family believe I was just a courthouse admin for years. "It was," I replied, "but mostly it was lonely." And as soon as I said it out loud, I realized how true that was, not just for me, but for so many women who had learned to stay small to play roles instead of living truthfully. The episode went semi-viral. My inbox flooded with messages from law students, young professionals, even senior attorneys saying some version of "I thought I was the only one." And just like that, my story, the one I'd kept buried for so long, became a bridge for others. Funny how that works? That summer, I hosted a dinner for the women in my mentoring group. It was our biggest turnout yet. 22 women gathered in my apartment, balancing wine glasses and charcuterie plates, trading stories that ranged from hilarious to heartbreaking. Vanessa showed up late holding a tray of lemon bars she'd made herself. "They're not from a box," she said proudly. The group welcomed her like an old friend, and at one point I found her deep in conversation with a junior marketing analyst who had just left a toxic agency. "I know what that feels like," I overheard Vanessa say, "but you don't have to prove anything to anyone who doesn't already see your worth." I nearly teared up. Not because she was being supportive, but because she was being real. By August, Jack had moved back into his apartment, but the engagement ring remained in its box. "They're talking," Vanessa told me one evening over takeout. "He's not gone. But we're starting over, on honest terms this time." "And if it doesn't work?" I asked. She shrugged. "Then it doesn't work. But for once, I won't pretend my way through it." I smiled. "Growth looks good on you." She threw a French fry at me. "Judgy." "Always." We both laughed, a real belly-deep kind that made me realize something. This ordinary evening with pizza and sarcasm was what I'd wanted all along. Not a perfect sister, not a flashy relationship, just truth. And the freedom to show up as myself without apology. As the sun set behind the skyline, we sat quietly for a while, each of us lost in thought. Vanessa finally broke the silence. "You know," she said, "I always thought being the favorite meant being perfect." "And I always thought being quiet meant being safe," I replied. We looked at each other, and it was as if we'd both finally arrived at the same destination, just from different directions. "Neither is true," I said softly. "Not even close," she agreed. And for once, we didn't need to say more. We just let the stillness speak for us. 3 months after that dinner, I found myself seated in my chambers late one Friday reviewing briefs for a complex fraud case scheduled the following week. It had been a long day, a long year really, but I felt calm, settled. I wasn't just wearing the robe now, I owned it. There was a knock at my office door. My clerk peeked in. "Sorry, Judge. I know it's late, but someone left this for you downstairs." She handed me a small envelope. Heavy cream-colored paper, no return address. Just my name in blue ink. I opened it carefully. Inside was a simple handwritten note. "Thank you for teaching me that being real is better than being right. V." There was no gift, no flowers, no grand gesture. Just that. And it was enough. The following Sunday was our parents' wedding anniversary, 40 years of imperfect, messy, still-standing love. They invited the whole family for dinner like they always did, but this time the energy was different. There was nervousness, yes, but also something softer, as if we were all showing up with more awareness, less armor. Dad wore an apron over his Bears t-shirt and insisted on making his famous ribs, which no one liked, but everyone ate. Mom was fluttering in the kitchen, anxious as ever, but more open. She asked real questions this time, not just about work, but about how I was feeling. She actually waited for the answer. Vanessa brought a bottle of wine and a playlist of Motown hits. Jack came too, not as her fiancé this time, but as a quiet presence. They weren't officially back together, but there was hope in the way he looked at her. And more importantly, in the way she looked at herself. During dinner, Dad stood up, no glass to clink, no dramatic toast. Just a hand on Mom's shoulder and a deep breath. "I know we haven't always gotten things right," he said, voice rough. "But we're trying. And we're proud of both our daughters. Not because of what you do, but because of who you are." It wasn't poetic, but it landed. Vanessa reached for my hand under the table. I didn't let go. Later that night, as everyone trickled out, I stepped onto the back porch alone. The same patio where months earlier Vanessa had tried to toast "knowing your place." The same patio where everything cracked open. Now the string lights above me glowed soft and warm. Not like a spotlight. More like a welcome. Vanessa joined me a moment later, 2 glasses in hand. She handed me one and clinked hers lightly against it. "To the truth," she said. I raised my glass, and to not hiding from it anymore. She smiled. "You know, I used to think strength meant winning, being on top, being loud enough to fill every space. And now," she looked up at the lights, thoughtful, "now I think it's about showing up, especially when it's hard, especially when you're scared." I nodded. "Yeah, that sounds right." We stood there in silence for a bit, sipping wine and watching the stars blink through the haze of city light. No performance. No pretending. Just 2 sisters side by side, letting the past breathe and the future unfold. And in that quiet moment, I knew we weren't going back to how things were. We were going somewhere better. Together. Autumn came with its usual chill, not just in the air, but in the sense of clarity it brought. Crisp mornings, long shadows, and a feeling like the emotional whirlwind of the year had finally begun to settle into something solid. Vanessa and I didn't magically become best friends overnight. We still had friction. There were still moments when old habits surfaced, a sarcastic comment, a defensive eye roll, a pause too long before answering a question. But now, when those things happened, we named them. We didn't let them fester. We were practicing something new, honesty with softness. That was harder than I expected. Especially for 2 women raised to equate love with approval and identity with achievement. One Sunday morning, we met at a small arts fair downtown. Vanessa had a booth, her first. She was showcasing her charcoal sketches and watercolors, tiny prints she'd made of city skylines, windows lit in the dark fire escapes that looked like veins. Her style was moody, detailed, oddly hopeful. As I wandered through the booth watching people quietly admire her work, I felt something rise in my chest. Pride, not for what she had accomplished, but for how she was doing it. No lies, no performances, just her. Vanessa noticed me watching and came over. "Weird, right?" she said. "What?" People actually like my stuff. I nudged her shoulder. It's goodness. Like, really good. She looked away, but I saw the smile stretch across her face. I didn't think I had anything to say if it wasn't part of a pitch. You were wrong, I said. You have a lot to say. You just needed to stop shouting over yourself to hear it. She laughed. Okay, Judge. Calm down with the wisdom. I raised an eyebrow. You brought it on yourself? That evening we sat on a bench overlooking the river. She was exhausted emotionally, artistically, maybe spiritually, but it was a good kind of tired. The kind that follows effort well spent. I was talking to Jack, she said after a while. We're not rushing into anything. No rings, no timelines. Just seeing what it feels like to be honest with each other, without the pressure. I'm glad, I said. And therapy's helping, she added. I'm starting to understand that most of the pressure I thought came from Mom and Dad, it came from me. I nodded. That was hard for me to admit too. I thought they only loved me when I sparkled, she confessed. But maybe they were just clapping for the only version of me I ever showed them. I let the words settle. Same for me, I admitted. I thought they didn't love me because they didn't celebrate me like they celebrated you. But maybe I never gave them the chance. She leaned back, arms crossed, eyes closed. We've both been trying so hard to survive the version of each other we made up in our heads. Yeah, I said. Maybe it's time we retire the fantasy and make room for who we actually are. Later that night, back in my apartment, I pulled out the planner Vanessa had given me, the one with my initials and her note tucked inside. I flipped to the next month and started writing. Not a ruling, not a case note, just my own words, thoughts, questions, fragments of a life I was finally claiming for myself. And at the top of the page, I wrote something simple. You don't have to shrink so others feel tall. You don't have to hide what you've earned. You're allowed to be brilliant and kind at the same time. I closed the planner, and I felt seen, not by Vanessa, not by Jack, not even by my parents, but by myself. Finally. The funny thing about truth is that once it's spoken, really spoken, it can't be put back. It changes everything, but not always in the way you expect. When I first admitted to my family who I really was, a judge, not an assistant, a woman who had spent years building her career in silence, I thought the fallout might break us. And for a while it did. It cracked the illusions we'd all clung to. It shattered the roles we'd rehearsed since childhood. The golden daughter, the quiet one, the peacemakers, the parents doing their best. But in that breaking, something else emerged. Honesty. Not loud or flashy, but steady. Steady like early morning light. Like trust earned, not demanded. Vanessa and I are still rewriting our story, not with grand gestures or picture-perfect holiday photos, but in the small ways that matter more. She sends me sketches sometimes just to see what I think. I forward her articles from The Atlantic about women and ambition. We tease each other. We correct each other. We listen. We're not trying to be perfect anymore. We're just trying to be real. And that's more than I ever hoped for. If you've ever hidden parts of yourself to make others more comfortable, I see you. If you've ever let someone rewrite your story because you were too tired to fight, I understand you. But here's what I've learned. You don't owe anyone your silence. And shrinking yourself won't protect anyone, not really. Because the people who truly love you, they want to know the whole you, even the parts that shine. Especially the parts that shine. So stand up, speak up, and never, never apologize for being brilliant.